All right, well, it is 2 o'clock Central, 3 o'clock Eastern. We are going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone, to Automation Hour on July 9th, 2021. So a few logistics just to get us all started. Everyone will join with their lines on mute. We are going to open it up for you to post your questions on the Trailblazer community in the Salesforce Automation Hour group, and we'll be monitoring those so we can answer those live for you. We are going to record the session and we will post it to the Automation Hour website after the session is complete today. And again, we invite you to follow us on the Trailblazer community, the Salesforce Automation Hour group, and of course, make sure you've got the website Automation Hour bookmarked so you can check out our awesome upcoming lineup.
You're not sharing your screen, Miss Sebo.
Oh no.
All right, there you go.
All right, so I'll throw this back up just for a minute so you can grab the website if you need to. And then our upcoming sessions. Today we have the wonderful Josh going to present for us. Coming up later this month, we've got MVP Mary Tagler. Then through the fall, we've got another series of great presenters, including a number of return guests and MVPs. So we're excited for that, and we'll hope you join us. All right, as always, we want to send a shout out to our sponsor, Concrete.io. Without them, we could not bring this to you and help celebrate our love of all things automation. So thanks so much to them. Want to give a shout out to the founders of Automation Hour. They are 5 years old, or we are 5 years old now. So, and it's thanks to the brain trust of David, Jen, and Rakesh. And we've had a little bit of a change now that Jen's moved on to Salesforce. I'm glad to have stepped up to be a co-host on Automation Hour. So we are glad you are here. And with that, we are going to get ready to turn things over to today's presenter, Josh Damon, who's going to show us some really cool Flownatic stuff. So, all right, Josh, I am going to make you presenter here.
All right, let me find the correct screen to share. All right, there it is.
All right, thanks everybody. So my name is Josh Damon. I'm the Salesforce Platform Manager for Recruit Military and Bradley Morris. Today, I'm going to kind of go over something that that was a little bit of labor of love for me, and that was actually building a search functionality inside of a Salesforce flow. A lot of people are just thinking like, hey, just use lookup, but what we needed to do was provide a more specific targeted type of search for customers that are inside of an experience site. So basically, backstory is about a year and a half ago, one of our product lines is called MBA Veterans. It's a program where we help military veterans that are attending one of the top 100 MBA programs across the globe connect, network, and apply for internships or job postings with Fortune 500 companies that are sponsors at MBA Veterans. But for MBA Veterans, for the client side of it, for those sponsors, they want to be able to go in and search for specific veterans for their specific roles as well. They're looking for things like somebody's education background, maybe their military service, or something related with maybe their undergraduate program, things like that. So it's not something that you can get from just adding a lookup to a flow screen. And this entire platform, prior to being moved to an experience site, was actually on an old PHP site. So it was all done using Java, JavaScript, and all that. So our initial thought was, hey, the search part of it, what are we going to do? We're going to make a whole bunch of Apex classes, a whole bunch of custom, maybe JavaScript, or reaching out to another database. But instead, we decided to just take a crack at it via Flow, and we learned a lot, really, when we started doing that. We learned really what the power of using Apex inside of a screen flow or a regular flow works, especially with a screen flow, because you're giving the user the ability to do things, and then you're using the power of Apex to process a lot of that data on the back end. So to kind of give you an idea, this is my flow here. My flow basically, what we do is we are going to query some users. We're going to display those users to the running user. Those users are also candidates, and then we're going to give them some search options. They're going to be able to search by keywords using SOSL. We're going to be a more direct approach using SOQL to search. Also doing a lookup using just a standard lookup type component, and then be able to display those records for them to be able to sort, view, save, maybe communicate with those specific candidates, all within one screen flow. So this is where the screen flow sits today that we're looking at right now in the back end. About a year ago, this is what the flow looked like before we started to add in SOQL and SOSL and a whole bunch of other things to include some custom components that I've been involved with as well. So we went from that down to this. Just really what really drove a lot of that was adding in the SOQL and SOSL Apex actions. So before I get any further, I am going to pause to see if anybody has questions on the use case or anything like that before I go. If not, then I'll just keep going. All right, perfect. So real quick, we'll show you what it looks like first, how the search functions inside of the community, and then we'll take a deep dive into the flow. So this is my flow inside of the experience site. My first page here is just showing my highlighted candidates for this week. As I go through here, all these candidates are being displayed on a flex card. You can find the flex card on officialsf.com. Something that I was involved with heavily on the development, and have some new release coming out hopefully at the end of this month on FlexCard as well. But what this does is allows me to display a collection of records and specific fields, along with I can also add in subflows on each individual cards, and these flows, this will then launch that flow into a new screen in Modal where I can see even more information. But then through my flow, in order to keep my queries smaller and better performance my flow, I limit it to users using custom buttons down here at the bottom to sort candidates alphabetically by last name. And then you see an option over here for customer saved search. So when we do customer saved search, this is where the real cool stuff really starts to happen with this flow. From here, I'm giving them what kind of search that they're going to be using. Save search, when you run a search and it returns the types of candidates that the user wants, I actually give the user an option to save that, and what that's going to do when they save it, it actually saves on a custom object that I have inside of Salesforce that stores that search query so that they can actually run their saved searches at any given time. It'll actually populate with new data. All that save search does is just saves what that criteria is for their search. Single member search, that's going to do just a single lookup. So if I'm looking for somebody specific, I can come here and I have my lookup component that we have. So if I wanted to find somebody specific, I can come in here and I can find Robert Griffin, for example. My other options are a filtered search. So my filtered search, this is actually going to use, when I do my filtered search, based off of what the user inputs here, I take and I build a SOQL statement. So then I run a query on users using normal SOQL statements, but we're going to execute that action via Apex and then return that record collection and display later on in the flow. So for example, if I wanted to see everybody that attends Arizona State University that maybe is in the Army, I can come and I can click next. And what that does is it returned 8 candidates from the pool of a little over 1,500 for Arizona State University. And it's going to give me everybody that's there based off of my SOQL statement. And then, like I said, from here I can download a CSV of my results. I can save the search, and when I also save the search, I can also set it up to where I can receive a PDF of all the resumes via email for these specific candidates. But I'm going to go ahead and reset my search, and then that takes me back to this screen here, where maybe that wasn't exactly what I wanted. Maybe I wanted to do Arizona State University and Baylor. Maybe I wanted to net that up. I also want to see everybody that's going full-time and online and Army, and then we'll also include the Navy guys. So now I got 15 candidates from that entire piece there. So we're seeing a mix of Army and Navy along with Baylor and Arizona State University. Now, when one other search, which I think is probably one of the coolest ones that we do, and that is going to be a keyword search or a phrase search, and that's going to use SOSL. Not a lot of people are really, I'm finding not a lot of people are familiar with what SOSL is. So what SOSL basically does is it allows you to enter in a keyword or phrase, and then what Salesforce will do will search across all objects or search across a specific object in all fields or on specific fields that you set for those keywords. It behaves very similar to global search inside of Salesforce. When you think of global search is actually using SOSL. But what we're going to do is we're going to bring that global search into Flow to where I could type in Navy, maybe submarine. And what this will do is it will return anybody that has either Navy or has submarine inside of their profile someplace. It might not be something specific. So we might actually see a Marine Corps guy here because he had Navy somewhere in his profile. So if I open up Kevin Graham, I should see either the words Navy or submarine someplace in his profile, and he's actually got a lot here. So for me to filter through and come through, but you have advantages both ways for a SOQL or a SOSL statement. SOSL, if I just know like, hey, I'm looking for anything that has this keyword or this key phrase in it, and I'm happy with that, that's a great keyword search. Or if I don't know what I'm looking for, I just know I'm looking for something like this. That's something that we can do. Compared to SOQL, it's going to give you a more refined type of search, and you can dig in and see exactly what that data is. So that's what the Flow does. Let's kind of stop there and get into the weeds of exactly how all of this works and how it all comes together. So broken up into sections. So this first section of my flow up here at the top, this is basically just what we saw down at the bottom in the screen, all of the different categories of A through C, D through F, things like that. First things that we have getting my top users. Getting my top users, I'm just doing it by MBA programs are rotating every week. Using a normal get step. Then we're displaying all of that on a flex card. This one you see is labeled MBA flex card flow. This is a little bit different from the one that's on unofficial SF. I had a specific need inside of the community. But what we see here on the right is all standard stuff that comes with the normal flex card. Just some stuff on the back end that I had to customize for a specific use case for this. But what we see here is FlexCard, like I said, returns a collection of records. So our input variables here are going to be the object that I'm going to input into my component, my box sizes in pixels, it squares off what size box, can be any size, and then my visible field names, what fields am I displaying inside of my card. The record collection that I'm displaying in my card, header style, I can use standard HTML styling elements here to add specific color to the background or maybe font weight, things like that. Icon is going to be standard user, what I'm using for my fallback icon. If you have a field that's called source URL, you'll see in the documentation if you go visit Unofficial SF, that will actually display an image based off of what image URL is in that field. Is clickable, is used if you're only going to be, if you want to make a card clickable to be used further downstream in your flow. And then we need object API name once again, just due to how some of the JavaScript works. And then my visible flow name. So like I said, the great thing about Flex cards is that I can display a subset of flows that we can launch in modal on the right-hand side of the card. So what I'm doing there in visible flow names is just adding an API name to my individual flow. And then all of those buttons that we saw down at the bottom, they're all component buttons for navigate buttons that are just going down, and that we see actually in the decision based off of what the user selected, which path they're going to go down. So if I selected P through R, we're doing the same thing, but this time we're just going to get users where their last name starts with P through R, and then display it all the same way into that flex card component. But my custom search, what we do here is we go ahead and clear our search options because we set that variable. We're going to reuse that variable throughout the flow based off of what different paths or actions that the user takes. And then we assign the search type options into a text collection. And then here we have our search filter. So I'm actually using quick choice from Unofficial SF again here to display all of this into a pick list. So those unfamiliar with the way this component works is I can have labels and values using string collections. I can use a pick list field from a specific record. I can also display these differently. So maybe I wanted to display these as visual cards. I could have done that also, or a radio button group. For my use case and feedback that I got from some of our customers, that pick list was just better. So we did that, and then you set your values here. Next up, basic decision on what we're doing. When we look at our decision, we have our single candidate search, our safe search, our keyword search, and then my default outcome is going to be my SOQL search. So our safe search choice, like I said, I'm storing at the end, if somebody saves that search, I store that in an NBA Veterans Custom Search object. And what it does is it stores the values that the user selected for that specific search and the type of search. So what we do is we query that, we assign those to a collection via a loop here, and then we're returning those once again in a quick choice where we're giving the choices and values. This time I'm using two different string collections, one that has a label and one that has value for the record ID, so I know which one to go and get in return for my search. And then as you can see down through here, we move on where we're getting that saved search from that selected value. That's why I'm using two different collections, one that I'm presenting to the user and one that I'm using on the back end to actually get my records. And then from there, I update my search variables. These search variables are what I'm going to be using to build my SOQL statement in order to query my records. Also, the other options that we have, like I said, we have keyword search. And keyword search, this is going to build a SOSL statement. So, like I said, SOSL looks across all fields on either a specific object or across all objects in Salesforce. And my SOSL will see that we're looking at specifically just on the user object. So I'm dwindling it down to that, which really kind of improves performance and speed over all of my search. And then I'm also limiting my users to just 3 words or phrases in their search parameters. And that's just because it makes it easier for me to maintain the flow and less confusion really inside of my flow when we start to in the next step, which is the decision on how we build that SOSL statement. So from here, you can see I have several different decisions based off of user input in that first screen, and we're looking to see if there's a string for keyword phrase 2, 3, so on and so forth. And based off of that, we're going through and we are assigning basically our search criteria. So my search query that we're going to use inside of the Apex action for SOSL here, this one is I'm adding keyword phrase 1, and search query is a text collection. You can also see here we have where I'm adding keyword phrase 1 and phrase 2. But what we do next is we're just using Apex then to go in and search across all of my users, and I'm going to return some specific fields. So if you want to do this, all you do is you install this Apex action. It's called get collection as an S object. So we're going to get a user, and then I'm going to set the field API names to return. I'm returning all of these fields that I'm going to use further downstream in my flow. Once again, some of that little nuance there, we have to enter that object API name again. Bypass sharing rules, what this does is it basically overrides some of your org-wide defaults. So for example, if you're running a flow where you're going to query contacts and then change the contact owner or change maybe the account on that contact, and you're not the owner of that contact and you're set to private, this Apex action will allow you to override that if you set this to true and grab that contact and make that change further downstream in the flow. The same Apex action has where you can do a list of IDs. So this will do the same type of thing. Instead of using a search query, I could actually send in a list of IDs in this Apex action or return that list of records based off of the ID. But I am using search query. My search query is what we were building earlier using my keywords, where I'm adding different phrases or keywords based off of the user input in that screen to my search query. Search scope. Search scope allows me to do an in statement. If you're familiar with SOSL, what an in statement is it says, it basically is telling me only will look for these keywords in these following fields. So my search scope, so maybe if I wanted to only look for Navy in branch of service, I could set that via my search scope. And then my where clause, similar to SOQL statements, where it's just like any other where clause, where I'm saying my where clause where profile ID is equal to this specific profile ID. And then so you can see what type of information it outputs. It just outputs a collection based off of the object that you select further upstream. So then from there, what I'm doing next is I'm just assigning an account just for display reasons. And then I have a decision that sees if there was results found or no results found using any of my different search methods. If there's no results, they get a nice screen that says, hey, no results, try again. If not, then we move up where we're getting the same thing, what we saw earlier, where we're displaying the results of those candidates via flex card, and then giving some buttons as far for the user to be able to do, like save their search, reload search. We see here takes them back to a specific page. Or if they save it or download a CSV, we come through and give them options as far as naming that CSV file. And then we're using some very unique Apex actions once again to create that CSV. And then we are sending, then we're going to create a content version and create a content delivery, then get the public link for that content delivery, and then display that to the user. Or we're not actually displaying, we actually open that up in a new tab using another Apex action to automatically download that file for the user as they're going through. That's our SOSL search. I'll stop there before I get into the SOQL. As we can see, there's a lot more going on with SOQL and building that SOQL statement based off of how we have to do it. But I'll kind of pause to see if we have any questions around SOSL or anything like that yet.
All right, we got a couple of questions, Josh. So a couple of questions came in. So the first one from Chris. Why is the keyword phrase 1 empty on the edit screen for the SOSL keyword search? So you had an empty string in keyword 2 and 3, but keyword phrase 1 was empty.
Yep. So keyword phrase 1, I make it a mandatory field. So if they're going to be using that search, there's always going to be a value there. Because I make that required in the screen. Let me get back to that screen so you can kind of see that. So you see here, I do make keyword phrase 1 required. So there wasn't any need for me to house an empty string as a default in keyword phrase 1.
Perfect. Okay, so next question. What Salesforce technology is providing the view profile click-through? And that's also from Chris.
Yep, so that's going to be from unofficial SF. It's called FlexCard. That view profile, that's actually that's actually another flow that we're running. Let me grab FlexCard on another screen here. I'll pull up that article here. Here, I'll pull it up so you can kind of see. So this here was a project I was involved with, one of the first ones I've done with unofficial SF, where we took and we built out this FlexCard component. Crompant was actually the one that engineered the subflow part of it. What that does, like I said, in FlexCard, it allows you to just set an API name for a screen flow, and then what we see on the right-hand side of the cards here is the label for that screen flow that we're running, and then that'll open it up in Modal inside of Salesforce. If you're going to be using it inside of an experience site, there's a little bit more that goes into it based off of the Lightning Web Component that we're using to run that. But if you ping me on LinkedIn or Twitter or something, I'm happy to hop on and kind of take you through the customization I had to do to get it to work into an experience site. Little bit of nuance based off of permissions and licenses that go with Visualforce and Aura components and experience sites, and it wasn't glorious. We'll put it that way.
Awesome. So I think we also took care of Hugo's question on whether that FlexCard was a standard or custom component. Since it's from unofficial SF, I suppose technically it's custom.
Yeah. Yeah, it is custom. You can install it as a upgradable unmanaged package. I think I'm on version 1.1.1 right now. I've had a couple releases on it, or 1.1.2. I do have another version, like I said, coming out later this month with some enhancements. Hopefully, fingers crossed if I have time.
Awesome. All right, so last just comment, this presentation has a number of advanced examples of flows capabilities, and I just got to basically thumbs up and say, yeah, this is super complex and super cool.
All right, thanks. Sometimes I try to do stuff simple, and something I always try to tell people is I try to push flow in Salesforce to absolute limits. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But if we don't have anything else, I'll move on to SOQL and that piece of it. I know some people are going to be more familiar with SOQL compared to SOSL, because I knew nothing about SOSL actually until I started this project. So, so SOQL, like I said, standard Salesforce object query. What we're going to do is we're going to take what we saw on that one screen here up here, where the user is using the dual list box to build out their search criteria. We're going to take that and we're going to basically build a SOQL statement that we're going to do a SOQL statement where we return records based off of the SOQL that the user is building. The user has no idea that they're building a SOQL statement, but us as admins or devs are going to know that we're building a SOQL statement because it's a fun exercise to do, because it's going to involve us doing some formulas along with adding some stuff to collections and crazy wazoo things. But it's actually pretty simple once you get your hands onto it and you start learning how it all works inside of Flow. Oops. Helps if I do my correct search here. Like I said, these are just dual list boxes that we're going to go ahead and build out our SOQL statement. So inside Salesforce, how that works is we have our decision here where it was a keyword search. In my keyword search, I am going through and I'm going to build all those values that we see here in these dual list boxes. We're going to build all that based off of values that I have on pick lists or that I'm going to assign in my flow. Large, you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them are all pick lists that live on that object inside of Salesforce. And I'm actually using Apex actions for this too, just because it's faster, it's easier, and it's not something that I have to build and maintain in several different places. So if I just wanted to build a list inside of a flow, like what I'm doing here to use quick choice, I had to add all these values to a collection that I can use in a component compared to something that lives on the actual object itself. I can use this great Apex action as part of the actions bundle from Unofficial SF as well, where all I'm doing is, hey, go ahead and get me the pick list values for the undergraduate major pick list on the user object, and return all of those as a comma separated list as a text string. So what we do is I'm doing that for each of the pick lists that I'm going to use to build. I'm doing the exact same action here. And then there's some stuff that's going to be ever rotating, or when we first built it, we didn't think 3 years ahead like what we do now. Like for our branch of service, we use several different variations of branch of service. So for this, I just built out the choice, because for this program, we're not saying only have candidates that are in the U.S. Army or the U.S. Navy. We have a lot of candidates that are attending MBA veterans that might have served in the Royal Majesty Services, or in the India. We have a lot of candidates that come from India that served there as well as the Middle East, everywhere. So we just want to know if you're Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, Air Force, and eventually we'll add Space Force there for those that are familiar with that scenario. And then once again, the same thing with our rank type choices. We have some specific ways that we did rank type choices. So I did this as just a normal collection as well. And then, in our screen, we're just displaying all of that via a list box. When we look at this, like I said, it's just all dual list boxes where we're putting in one string collection and then setting my values at the end. So then this is where it gets a little bit more complicated. This is on my to-do list to make this less complicated and to really dwindle this down. Just haven't really decided how to do that yet. But what this is going to do is it's basically going to tell me which I'm looking at schools. Yes, schools are in query. So it means selected MBA program is not equal to an empty string, and it's not null. So if there were schools that were selected in that very first dual list box, what we're going to do is I'm going to take that comma separated value. I'm going to convert it into a string, or I'm sorry, into a collection, and then I'm going to loop through that collection, because there's never a good flow unless it includes at least one. That's what my mentor Thomas Zipper always told me and taught me. So That's the truth. If you don't have a loop, it's not a good flow. So for each item, we're going to look and we're going to decide, is this an or statement or is it an and statement inside of my SOQL? If I'm only returning just one record, I'm going to add and. If I'm adding multiple things to my SOQL, I'm going to add an or, and we'll see that in the next two elements. So my default is an and. So what I'm doing is I have my MBA program SOQL variable, and I'm going to add a formula. And we'll take a look at what that formula looks like. And then I'm also going to add a loop count, so I know if I'm going to be adding an and or later on, because my or is going to do the exact same thing, except for I have an or formula that I'm going to add to my MBA program SOQL variable. So let's go ahead and take a look at what those formulas look like real quick. So my MBA program or formula. So like I said, we are building a SOQL statement. So this is actually going to be the end of my SOQL, not the beginning of my SOQL. I'm going to work backwards. So this is my or. So if I have multiple schools that are in there, I'm going to say, select users where MBA program is equal to XYZ, or MBA program is equal to XYZ, so on and so forth. So this is just my initial formula that I have at the end, where we're using or MBA program is equal to that loop MBA program collection. That's why I converted that comma separated variable of schools that were my output from my dual list box into a collection, so I could loop through the values that the user selected inside of the component. And then my and statement, I honestly forget what the name of it is, MBA program first value, is going to be here. So like I said, this is where we only have a single value. This is the first value where we're adding an MBA program is equal to X value. And these are just text formulas that are returning text, because after I'm done building out that statement for either or for and, what I'm going to do next is at the end of my flow, I'm adding and at the end of my SOQL variable. And then I'm going to add the final MBA program formula for SOQL. What that looks like is it is the MBA program SOQL variable, along with some spaces and things like that. My SOQL variable, how that actually starts out is we have a variable here where we're actually have a default value for base SOQL. Like I said, SOQL is a little bit more complicated based off of how we have to build it in order to get it to work. My base SOQL is actually a text template where we're starting to see things that are a lot more familiar, or I'm selecting the fields that I want from the user, where this is in my sandbox, so I want to look at people that attended last year, and then is active equals true. And then where you see through our assignments that we were showing earlier, where when we add things to our SOQL, we're adding the statement and where MBA program is equal to XYZ, or MBA program is equal to XYZ. And that's basically going to start building out our SOQL statement. As we move through, we're going through and we're doing the exact same thing. We're going to keep building out these statements based off of the user inputs for each of those list boxes. And each one is the exact same. We have decisions that decide, hey, was this done or not? if the user used this, there's a value here. Let's go ahead and do these loops and these assignments, and we're good to go. And then at the end of our loop, we keep adding on and building our SOQL statement and building our SOQL statement and building our SOQL statement. Once we figured all of this out, it became a lot easier to maintain and build this flow compared to what we were doing before. What we were doing before, we had like these crazy decisions like left and right of, hey, was this selected, this not selected, do I need to add this? And then we were basically getting every single record on the front end of the flow and then going through and evaluating every single record to see if it met the search criteria. Instead, what we're doing using SOQL or SOSL is going through and only getting the records that the user needs to see. We're not getting over 1,500 records in one go. So at the end, once I build out my SOQL statement, I have this execute SOQL query Apex action from unofficial SF again. What this is going to do is it's going to take that SOQL statement, my SOQL variable that I just built, and it's truly just, it's a normal SOQL statement that you would enter into Workbench or in VS Code or Apex, whatever your normal SOQL type actions that you're taking, and it's going to return a list of users that are based off of my SOQL query that I just built in Flow. Like I said, we're building that SOQL statement using a combination of loops and formulas throughout there to basically build it. And you can do that any different way. You can hard code in like I did with my base SOQL where I have my text template. And let's say you're not doing like a super duper advanced search like what I'm doing here. You just want to query maybe a couple of different things. You can just use flow variables that you're updating in your flow to build that SOQL statement. But like I said, the SOQL is going to be a lot quicker and a little bit more customizable, because I don't know how many times I've built a flow and I've been like, man, if I could just let the user edit the get statement to just get the stuff that they want without having to have 15 different get elements or decisions in this way, that's what the SOQL is going to allow me to do. It allows me to let the user input some data, build that SOQL statement using a formula, using a text template, and then return those records. So that's all this does. I take that SOQL variable that we built, and I return my final search results into a collection of users. And then just like before, we're going to assign an account, because everybody wants to know how many people are coming back in my search. And then comes right back through here and the same types of options. So we are going to pause there. I know I talk fast, and I probably missed like 15 things. I got 15 minutes left, so I want to leave some time for some questions or anything like that.
Sure. So we have one from, I think it's Tamar. If I butchered your name, I totally apologize, and you should yell at me later. But the question is, can you move the where clause building to a subflow and then call that subflow for each dual list box?
You could move it to a subflow, yes. And that would probably, that's a great idea. I'm probably going to take that into consideration for the next phase of this flow. There's a lot of other things I need to do too. But yeah, I mean, that's an excellent idea and a great way to approach it. And instead of processing all of these in one flow, it could be a subflow for each basically subset that you want. Absolutely.
Awesome. All right, well, so far that is the only question I'm seeing there. Let me do a quick refresh on the community just to make sure I didn't miss any over there. So one question I know I have, because I've seen a lot of the unofficial stuff, and it's a little daunting to use some of it, even though I love Flow, because some of it gets really into some of the Apex stuff or some of these component characteristics that you have to understand what they're asking for to fill out. How did you get started with the unofficial actions, and how did you get comfortable with them?
Yeah, so a lot of it has to do just like with my flow and automation journey overall, where we built a couple screen flows, and users were like, hey, this is really cool. And then people started asking questions, like a lot of user feedback of like, hey, yeah, is there a way to do this? And I'm a very inquisitive person. Like I said, I love to push things to the limit, like to break things. So I, people are like, I wasn't able to get a lot of the answers out of just using standard components that are available in Flow, which have come a long way in the last 3 years. Like absolutely amazing what the Flow team has been doing. But sometimes you have that little hey, I need to know how to do this, or I needed to do something specific. So what I do, what most good admins are going to do, I started Googling, hey, how do you do this? And every time I started Googling something, it would always bring me back to unofficial SF. So I would go ahead and I would install it in my sandbox. And then if I ever got stuck, I always comment on a post there or something along those lines of like, hey, I'm not understanding. I see in your walkthrough that it's doing XYZ, but I'm not able to get that. And you'll find that the guys that are working on official SF, guys and gals, are more than willing to help you out, answer those questions wherever you're going. How I got started, like helping to start develop on stuff was, like I said, I always seem to have like something very unique that I have as far as a requirement inside of our org. So I started to just kind of look through, and like I said, I'm inquisitive, so I wanted to. What's great about unofficial SF is not only is it available in an upgradable package that you can install inside of your org, but it's all open source on GitHub. So I didn't know anything left hand from right hand when it came to Apex actions or an Aura component, before we made the switch to Lightning Web Components for a lot of stuff, or even Lightning Web Components. If you asked me to build a Lightning Web Component a year ago, I'd have no idea what I was doing. But like I said, it's all open source, so I started to just learn what everything started to do as I started to study and running. Something that I learned a long time ago too, even like when I'm running a flow, when I'm testing a flow, is always run everything in debug when I'm testing as an admin, so I can see exactly what's happening in each action, and then that way I can kind of see, okay, that's how that variable gets set. Oh, okay, that's what that is. And like I said, if there's something in the documentation that you see like on a site like Unofficial SF or any of the other sites where we don't have a custom component, I bet you 99% of the time the author of that component is more than happy to help kind of talk you through. I don't know how many times I've hopped on with people on some of the components that I've built that are on Unofficial SF and just kind of help them either go through a use case of how to use that or answer a question on what they have. If it's something that I published on a site, like I want it to work for people. And if you guys have enhancements or ideas for how things can be better, don't be afraid to step in and contribute. I contributed on a couple of components that I wasn't responsible for, but added a couple things here and there. And that's really kind of how I got my start until things kind of took off with some of the other stuff that I've built recently.
That's fantastic. So thank you. All right, so we'll give it one last call for questions. Really appreciate all of you on the call that have been engaged in asking those. One last refresh on the community here, just make sure. All right, I don't see any more questions. So I guess, all right, with that, thanks Josh for coming to present today. We absolutely appreciate it. I mean, I'm blown away by this and in awe of it, and I honestly can't wait to try and figure out a use case for using some of this Apex actions in my own org. So thanks everybody for joining today. As always, if you've got more questions, feel free to hit us up in the community, or we also posted a link to our brand new Twitter handle in the chat, so we invite you to follow us on Twitter as well. So Josh, the thanks for pouring in. So again, we appreciate you being here, and hopefully we'll see you all next time.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate it, guys. Have a good one.
All right, have a great afternoon, everybody.